You are listening to the Get Global podcast, a weekly journey into the international business landscape with leaders, knowers, and doers from around the world who share their stories and insights on the issues that matter most. Get Global brings you the best to help you thrive in foreign markets. Welcome to the Get Global podcast. I am Julian Luthold, the founder and CEO of Get Global. And this week we have Erik Huberman, who is the founder and CEO of Hawke Media, a fast-growing marketing company focusing primarily on direct-to-consumer. Is that right, Erik?
I wouldn't say primarily. I mean, definitely the majority, but the small majority would be direct-to-consumer. We do a lot of business-to-business as well.
Gotcha. So tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you got into all of this.
Sure. Background is in e-commerce, so I do have a direct-to-consumer background. Had one music company and two fashion companies, sold both the fashion companies, and about 5 years ago started advising and consulting for different brands on how to drive revenue growth through marketing. So worked with Red Bull, Verizon, a lot of other big brands, as well as a lot of startups, and saw that there's a huge challenge when it comes down to execute on marketing, because there's two options. You hire a team in-house or hire an agency, but there are a plethora of reasons not to hire a marketing team in-house fully. A lot of times strategy makes sense, but when it comes down to the tactics, generally it's not cost effective. And that's if you can find and attract the talent. And even in a time like now when employment rates at an all-time low, it's really, really difficult to get cost-effective people. So the other option becomes agencies. The problem is 99% of agencies are built by people that have no idea how to build a business. And so they sell snake oil. They're constantly trying to sell you on services. They have no idea why it benefits you. The few that are any good tend to get really expensive on contracts, high minimums, et cetera. So that was the ecosystem I was playing in. Obviously not a very friendly one. So thought there was an opportunity to have a client-centric business that helped companies and did right things for the right reasons. So hired a small team of 7 people, an email marketer, Facebook search, influencer, affiliate, web design, and overall strategy. And went back to the clients I was already working with and just said, hey, it's all a la carte, all month to month, cheaper than hiring in-house. The idea here is you can just spin up a team that fits your needs based on this menu of services. And so that's how we started. Fast forward, it's been 4.5 years, and we've grown to about 130 people on that model, like an outsourced marketing team.
It's been a meteoric rise for you guys. A lot of folks in this town are kind of when they're looking at you guys with the secret sauce and wondering what it is, and it's not surprising now to hear about the international activities that you're getting into. What do you think has been the main contributor to that growth? Like how the hell are you guys doing it?
I sincerely think that timing's number one. I mean, we're at a time where everyone needed digital marketing talent. It's hard to find good quality talent, and we had a conduit to bring that talent together. And then it's just treating people well, doing the right thing for the right reasons. We have kind of 3 tenets here at the company. One is get shit done. So we attract people that know how to execute, not just work hard and spin their wheels, like actually complete things. Number 2 is learn quickly. So we attract people that are inquisitive, that are constantly trying to learn and dive in and grow. And then the last one is be cool. And that really comes down to like have EQ, be a good person. Like those 3 things, again, get shit done, learn quickly, be cool, is our culture. And so with that, we attract a certain type of person that frankly we thought makes a good marketer. And so far it seems like we've been right.
Excellent. So tell me about now that we've covered the basis of who you guys are and what you're up to and sort of what is a little bit of that secret sauce. What is the international context for all of this? I know that you have some pretty interesting international plans. Also know that you've got some cool things happening now and a little bit of background in all of this stuff. Give me the scoop on where Erik meets international.
Sure. There's quite a few ways. We actually, since inception, have had clients that are either all over the world already, come from overseas, et cetera. So we've never been a stranger to working with international brands. And what we've realized, through doing so is there's a couple things. One, obviously the U.S. consumer as a whole spends more than anywhere else in the world. And so any brand overseas is always has the U.S. in mind in some way. Now you have a few things on top of that, like the Brexit as an example, in the UK is now a lot of businesses there are starting to try to figure out if expanding into the rest of Europe is actually a good strategy, or should they just go the other way? Because the efforts, other than the geographic distance, to expand to the US, a lot of times are easier than to expand into even Germany next door or something, because you're dealing with, like a language barrier, culture barrier, et cetera, that's very minimal when it comes from the US to UK to Canada to honestly the English speaking countries. Even Germany, Sweden, a few Scandinavian countries tend to be similar, but then you start getting into Spain, Italy, et cetera, it gets more difficult. And so what we saw was a lot of European brands, like if they're going to expand into another country and deal with all the cultural changes, they may as well do it with the US, where you have the population of the US is the entire population of Europe, not just an individual European country. So you're hitting a massive consumer base with the same effort that you would hit a smaller consumer base. So logically, it just makes sense. And so we've started to become the brand to help those companies do so from Europe. And so we're looking at building an office in London to be our main touch point for that. Same thing actually goes with China. I mean, China's obviously a giant consumer base as well, but the next step from there is United States if they want to really scale. And so the same bridge is needed of how do we change what we're doing and then work with the US.
So you're bridging a few different worlds and wearing some hats. I think when people first get into this, they kind of underestimate. Well, I know that folks underestimate what it's like to go into foreign markets, but even attracting interest from foreign markets into the United States is an interesting activity. So on the one hand, you've got you've got cultural issues and explaining the United States to an outsider. We live here.
Yeah.
What's that been like for you?
Well, that's actually like you just actually nailed on a point in terms of like us getting clients overseas. The UK as an example, they're very traditional. They like working with they don't like the startup culture. And this is cultural. There's a generalization. I don't want to get a bunch of tweets about this, but fact of the matter is culturally in the UK, they like to see a proven track record. So we had a lot of benefits 4.5 years ago when we were first starting out as being the new sexy company on the block. Now we're kind of the incumbent. We hear tons of pitches that compare as to why they're better than us. So we've become that 800-pound gorilla. But in the UK, now we're established. It's actually easier to get business there. And so there's a lot of interesting nuance just in that dynamic. And then explaining the culture here to someone overseas, it depends on what you're dealing with. Again, UK, that's an example. Innovation's a big thing in the US and not so much there. So changing just subtle messaging is what's important in those. But as you get into different countries, it becomes very different in the way people communicate. I mean, next time you're bored, look at a Japanese website and try to discern what is going on. And that's a good example versus, here where everything's very utilitarian and clean. Japan, it's as bright and flashy as you could possibly be. And if you read Outliers and Gladwell, and it was that or The Tipping Point. I can't remember which book he talks about this, but Asian culture traditionally is much more, they call it the kind of a receiver culture versus the onus being on the deliverer in communication in the US. So when you're negotiating with someone that's more traditional in Asia, they say a lot of things and expect you just to put two and two together and understand it. Whereas in the US, it's more straightforward. It's my job as the one talking to make sure you understand me. In Asian culture, it's the receiver has to make sure they understand the person talking. So they talk in that context in Malcolm Gladwell's book, they talk about plane crashes because the air traffic control, the pilot keeps saying, we're low on fuel. They're like, okay, we're low on fuel. Okay, well, runway's coming up. What he wasn't saying was, we need you to put us on a new runway right now because I'm going to crash. And that's, again, when you're communicating in business negotiations, et cetera, we've experienced it with different clients from, especially in Asia, where it's they'll just say something. And from here, we're waiting for the point. And because, again, the cultural differences, sometimes my team has to be trained, they're waiting for you to understand the point. They're not going to make it to you, if that makes sense.
Sure. So how do you make sure that you're understood for their receivership?
Yeah, going the other way, it hasn't been as difficult. I think because we're taking the onus on ourselves, it's more about when they're trying to communicate to us than when we're trying to communicate to them. Because again, we're taking the onus to be the deliverer and make sure they understand us. It can feel forceful or rude, I think, is where it can come off sometimes. But I think as Americans, they just kind of expect that communication style. And again, what do you call it? Almost emotionally, I'm just assuming there's probably a little bit of like hesitation at first, like, whoa, this person's being very forward. But I think they get used to it because they're also very clear they're working with someone in the US. So we haven't lost anything in translation on our end. It's the other way, where we won't understand that this person has told us 10 times, that, they're not sure about the email marketing. And we're like, okay, well, we can look into it. Okay, well, we can look into it, not knowing that what they mean is that email is not going to work. That kind of, just as a hypothetical example.
So what are some additional kind of pointers that you tell your team about explaining America to foreign folks?
Yeah, I mean, one that we actually even talked about today is, be the thought leader. Like, you have to explain it. And it's important to understand nuance. A story that was a perfect example of this, I actually went to Russia for the World Cup and had a Russian friend. And no, I'm not doing business in Russia, but don't need that one. And I'm not running for any elected. So, but we're sitting there and he goes, it was actually a really fun experience because we were at lunch and I said thank you when the busboy brought my water, and then said thank you when they brought me the menu. And he looks at me, he's like, you Americans, it's thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's so insincere. Like, are you really thankful that they brought your menu? I'm like, yeah. I mean, and he's like, but it's their job. Like, you can say thank you once for them doing their job in general, but like, we have to say thank you every 10 seconds. And I'm like, see, and it took me a second because I'm like, okay, well, I guess I understand that if you're kind of rude, like, you don't like, it's weird to call me out for saying thank you. Like, from where I come from, again, we're talking about cultural differences. That's weird. And then it kind of clicked for me. And I said to him, like, it's funny because you think of me as insincere because culturally you're not doing, you're not used to saying thank you for everything. To us, you're rude for not saying thank you. So like, all it is differences. The same way I look at you and go, why wouldn't you say thank you for getting, someone just brought you water. You're not saying thank you. You're going to me and like, why are you saying thank you? Like, are you really thankful? It's literally cultural differences. And so explaining that dynamic, because that was like a perfect example of like, Americans think Russians are rude and Russians think Americans are insincere because both of them just have a small cultural difference around gratitude.
And in my country of specialty is India. In India, they've all got their own reasons, right? All these various cultures. The one that kind of caught me by surprise was I had a similar response from friends in India, and but when I dug a little bit deeper, I said, "So why are you guys getting irritated about that?" And they said, "Well, you shouldn't have to say that amongst friends. It should, it's just part of being a friend." They said, "We don't really thank each other here for that sort of thing." I thought that was kind of interesting too. And also the Russian one is always an interesting case where they think that we're being fake. But so being the thought leader, you gotta make sure that they understand that you're being clear with them, and picking out things like these little subtleties, like showing appreciation and when to do so and stuff like that. What are some of the things that, because one of the things that just fascinates me so much about marketing is how messages get debated, right? The calls to action and the color of things, like really subtle differences.
Well, cultural motivation is different. Like, again, if I said thank you in an email to a Russian, they might be like, you insincere prick. Versus if I don't say thank you in an email to an American, they might be like, wow, this person's really blunt and rude. Like, you have to know those little nuances in the cultures you're dealing with. Or again, it depends on who you're dealing with. There's big companies we work with that are very used to dealing with Americans, that they're not thrown off by the American way anymore, and we don't have to be as careful. But as we expand into this, and that's why, like, frankly, from our own expansion strategy, we're doing London first, because there's very little difference in the way you communicate and act. London's a little more polite and it's slightly different, but it's not going to like ruin many business dealings because of nuance. Whereas, a lot of the Mediterranean, a lot of Asia is so different. Like, you got to be very careful.
So what happens when a foreign party comes to you and they say, all right, we want to be marketing, I don't know, make up the product. and you're like, well, you can't really market that here in the States like that, and you have to sort of Americanize their message. What
Huh?
does that process look and feel like usually for your firm?
So it depends on the company. Honestly, sometimes borrowing a lot of what they've already done is a good thing because the cool thing is Americans like borrowing. There's a lot of interest in buying overseas things and foreign things. There's a sexiness to it. So we don't have to always reinvent the wheel in terms of their brand identity. It's more just the simple like advertising messages and the way emails are communicated. So it's usually more of a tactical thing than an overall strategy thing in that sense. Usually, every once in a while, you do get a brand that's positioned that you're like, yeah, that's not going to fly here. It could be over sexualized, et cetera. That you need to pull it back a little bit. Funny enough, Americans are conservative, so compared to a lot of Europe, as an example. So like, it depends on the brand. It depends on what you're doing. But the thing about Americans is they're pretty utilitarian. People are always going to be emotional buyers, which is where the brand identity comes in. But the way you do messaging and the way you tactically do it, a lot of times is just being pretty straightforward. And so that's again why, like for us, marketing in Germany, Scandinavia, and any English-speaking country, they tend to be the same. Versus a lot of other areas, Latin America, Mediterranean, and Asia, where it's more nuanced. And again, being straightforward is almost like being forceful and rude. So that's those kind of things are where you would differ. Like if we're getting an Italian brand in, they may feel that we're not being true to their brand when we get too straightforward, but that's where we have to like coach them on like, no, we understand, we're going to keep your brand, but this is what we need to do to actually get someone to buy something.
Hmm. So does it work?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes for the most part. Most of the time at that point, people have hired us because they trust our expertise. And so we go with it. We do get pushback where sometimes people, just don't click, don't get it, don't give us trust. And that's, there are engagements that will end because of that as well.
Yeah. Yep. Um, so tell me about this one that you're dealing with at the moment, which is a pretty big client that is on the tip of everyone's tongue. It seems Alibaba has been doing some aggressive expansion into the United States. They promised Donald Trump that they would make tons and tons of jobs. I can't remember the original figure, but it's Jack Ma's been publishing op-eds and stuff. I think he's gone a little bit quiet lately, but they've been doing a lot of events and lots of activity with Alibaba out here. How did that come up, and what's that been like working with them?
Yeah, it actually came up. We had an employee that knew someone there. It literally happened like that, and heard that they needed some help. He jumped in, we jumped in, and it's been, I think a couple years now is where we're at. Pretty sure we're around there. I'd have to look. Might be a year and a half, but yeah, it's been great. I can't share too much of what we're doing there, but honestly, they have offices all over the country. We're working mostly with Americans on that one, and on like surprisingly enough, because a lot of times you don't have this with larger companies, they've been a pleasure to work with. They're easy to communicate with. Like working with anyone for a couple of years, you're going to have things that come up in terms of issues to work through, et cetera. And they're sincerely great to work with, not just blowing smoke. It's actually been pretty shocking and surprising. There's been a couple times where they pulled in people from China, and there's been communication gaps. But again, because we've built this rapport and like credibility, kind of long, I don't want to say credibility, but long-standing relationship, they don't assume that we're screwing up right away. So they actually take a second to understand our communication style. And like, these are people that are also used to working internationally. So it hasn't been the challenges you would normally deal with a business going international haven't really happened with Alibaba because, I mean, our main touch point is born and bred America or US. And, some of their partners and people they'll pull in will be from overseas, but they're also trusting her to make the right decision too.
Nice. Well, it's nice to have folks working for you that have contacts like that, right?
Oh yeah. That's a whole side story, but I've talked to a lot of our employees about like the power of you have like everyone's network is like it's about utilizing your network. Like everyone knows someone in a good position. Like it's very rare that you don't have anyone that has done anything in a cool place or a cool company. Like most people listening to this podcast probably have that at least one person they can think of that's like, that person's in a really cool position. And so if you're in an opportunity to leverage it in a way that's not shady, of course, a lot of times there's no reason not to. It's been good.
For sure. So we've talked about foreign companies coming in, and we referenced your efforts to go and capture some of that interest proactively by opening up foreign offices. What's the global play for Hawke Media? You've got a good thing going, and have you thought about pointing your activities outside to servicing clients here going out, or is there?
Yeah.
Tell me more about the long term as you see it.
So to me, it's kind of like I mentioned before. Like we are, the top, if not one of the top, marketing firms in the country, in the U.S. Because we know this so well, we know how to build businesses here. That doesn't necessarily parlay into a lot of the rest of the world, and so I wouldn't want to do what a lot of companies do and a lot of agencies do and be like, oh, we can do that and fake it till we make it, because we're dealing with real people's money here and we don't want to just blow it. Like from the start of Hawke, I already had used my own money in my own companies to figure this stuff out and didn't start selling my services until I actually knew what I was talking about. And so I wouldn't want to do that overseas. What we are planning on doing eventually is probably going out, and there's a few options. One is to partner local agencies and figure out a way that there's anyone that we have that wants to go to their country, we send them, or vice versa. We also are actually acquiring a couple agencies, which has become interesting. So that could be an international plan as well. And then, the other option is once we build a team that helps bridge the gap to the US, there's a chance to attract people that know how to market there locally. And so there's kind of three models there, with whether it's partnerships, it just natural growth, organic growth and expansion there, or acquisition. And it could be a little bit of all three. It just depends.
Sure. So you've got Europe in the mix. You've got plans on China. What else is on your map right now? Anything coming up?
Just in general,
geographically, of course.
Yeah.
Do you do anything with like Canada, Mexico?
Yeah, I mean,
Japan.
Japan's awesome. We have a couple clients there already, and are hopefully closing a big one right now, which will be really fun to work with. I love Japan just as a personal bias. I just think it's a very, very fun, amazing country. So hoping to build some more there. Canada, we do a lot of work with already. That's actually just easy. It's very similar to the US in a lot of ways. The currency fluctuations have been a little annoying for our Canadian clients, but I think it's closer to, it's not equal, but it's gotten better. So it makes it easier for them to hire us. Mexico's tough because our cost as Americans that they're hiring, because our people are all in Santa Monica. It's tough for a Mexican company to justify it. So, Mexican consumer, et cetera, it's economics. Like the company can only sell something for so much, sell so many and pay us. Like a lot of times it just can't pencil. So we're still mostly dealing with affluent countries.
Mm-hmm.
Mexico's getting there. Mexico seems to be definitely on the up, but it's been more difficult. Now, the Hispanic community in the US, we have definitely targeted. So which is, again, it's actually a very similar practice to targeting another country, where it's a whole different culture, whole different communication, language barrier. The good news is if you're in LA, finding people that speak Spanish is not very hard. So we've been able to do a lot there too.
Yeah. So you've got an event coming up, just like we do. And tell me a little bit more about Hawke Fest. Sure. You're going into your third year, right?
Second.
Yep. Wow, nice. So second year, and what do you have planned? What's in store here?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we learned from, I don't even want to say mistakes. We were really happy with our first year, but definitely had some tweaks to make that were like to make it that much better. Just simple, like kind of, what do you call it? Like velocity of the day and making sure things move a little quicker, et cetera. But it was a great event. The whole idea is to bring together some of the top minds in e-commerce for a day of learning from each other and having fun doing it. Like that is really the goal. So it's like networking, education, and fun. And so, the whole thing's circus themed. It's in Santa Monica. It's on October 4th. And it's yeah, we brought in some of the, top thought leaders in the e-commerce space. I mean, last year we had the CMO of Honest Company, we had the founders of FabFitFun, we had Snack Nation, Grunt Style, which is a bootstrapped massive company, like all these really cool brands. And this year, a lot of them are coming back, but as guests, because I don't want to make it repetitive. And, swapping them out with a lot of the guys that have come up this year, or the people that, just different great companies. And so we've got MeUndies, Movement Watches, a bunch of other, we have Moa, the luggage company, like a bunch of other cool brands coming in. And then this time we changed it up a little bit. We've actually included people that invest heavily in the space because they have a lot of insight that an individual operator may not, as well as some really cool operators for, like, I don't want to say service businesses, but companies that help advise on things like global expansion for brands. And so we've opened it up a little more from last year. And I think it's just going to be higher quality. And again, learned a lot from the pace last year that we were able to incorporate this year.
And full disclosure here, I've been helping a little bit with your team. I'll be speaking there, and we've got Joel Backler, who is also on my advisory board. He's coming out with a book on influencers, and you got Josh from Getting to Global, who knows more about some of the cool stuff about international e-commerce than pretty much anyone I know. He's really a great resource. It looks like it's going to be a really fun event. I can't wait. It's October 4th, right?
Correct. Yeah. And it should, all day event should be awesome. I mean, we've got some fun surprises too. So the whole goal here is to make it not just like a conference. It's the anti-conference, which I'm using air quotes, but we really don't want it to feel like a conference. We want it to feel like a cool day of like really learning something and having a good time.
Well, you're taking over a Victorian house in Venice. That's going to be so. I've been there. It's one of those cool landmark spots on Maine. Yep. Kudos to a cool.
Yeah, we're excited. Last year we took over a parking lot, and we have an amazing producer, Carolina, who turned this parking lot into like the coolest like adult playground that we've ever, and like picnic tables, and we had like a magician and dance classes and all sorts of stuff. But then these incredible speakers, and now this year, I'm excited to see, because honestly, have the ability to be hands off because of her. Yeah, so it's been good.
Excellent. So beyond Hawke Fest, what's in the near future for you? What's coming up? Non-geographically now.
Non-geographically, we're also creating a kind of upmarket service called Hawke Media Partners to help massive company marketing turnarounds. So where we're having like brand decay and things with these big brands, and private equity buyouts, things like that. We're actually coming in and doing audit and SWOT analysis on the companies to present to the private equity firm. Here's your kind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of this company from a marketing perspective. And then once they buy it, helping actually insert a CMO full-time for a finite period of time while we help build out their team internally and service them from our end to build out a marketing strategy that makes sense for the brand from all the data we've collected. So that's been a really fun. We're also building out kind of a secret project around helping small businesses, like very small, like can't afford to hire anyone kind of businesses on marketing. Just a lot of expansion in a different way. We're, as I mentioned, making some acquisitions, working on the global expansion, and also some secrets I can't just share yet, but it's a lot going on here, as well as running our venture fund and helping invest in cool up and coming companies as well.
Well, you guys are full of surprises. We'll be hanging out, and maybe we'll revisit this in a few more months. Maybe after Hawke Fest.
Probably about good timing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Erik, hey, thanks for spending time today. Yep. Always a pleasure, and talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to find out more about our events and get more global intel every week, sign up for our newsletter at getglobal.co.